Hey, what is going on everybody? It is Rob, aka The Diligent Dev, and welcome to this video tutorial where we're going to be building out a real-time shopping list using AWS Amplify. Now, AWS Amplify makes it extremely easy to use a lot of AWS services like Cognito, AppSync, and DynamoDB tables. So let's go ahead and jump over to the computer and see exactly what we're going to be building. Okay, so here we are over the computer, and let's take a quick look at what we're about to build. You'll see that our home page is a sign-in page, and this is a component that is provided by AWS automatically. You have the ability to sign in, reset your password, and create a new account. Let's go ahead and sign in. And upon sign in, we're taken to a shopping list, and this is a real-time shopping list. We can delete items. We can add items to our shopping list. And to show you the real-time functionality of this, let's pin this to this screen. Open up a new browser tab. And pin it to this side of the screen. And you'll see that if we add something over here, it is also added on this screen in real time. So without any further ado, let's start coding this out.
First thing you're going to need to do is go to aws.amazon.com and go ahead and sign up for an account if you don't already have one. The next thing we're going to do is install the AWS Amplify CLI. So I'm going to open up a new terminal and I'm going to run the following command: npm i-g for global at aws-amplify/CLI. And once this is done installing, I will be right back. Okay, so the Amplify CLI has installed successfully, and the next thing we're going to do is create our Vue project. So to do that, I'm going to cd into my desktop directory, and then I'm going to run the following command: npx vue creates amplify shopping list. And then we're going to choose manually select features. We're going to choose Babel, router, and linter formatter. Hit enter. We're going to say yes to use history mode. And then we're just going to select ESLint plus prettier. We will lint on save. We will keep these in dedicated config files. And we're not going to save this as a preset for future projects. And once this is done, I will be right back. The next thing we're going to do is run amplify configure. And what this is going to do is prompt you to log in to your account that you created. And now that we logged in, we have to come back to the console and hit enter. We're going to choose a region. It's going to be US East-1. We're going to specify our username. Then it's going to open our IAM console. With our username, make sure you have this checkbox for programmatic access checked. We'll go to permissions. We're going to choose administrator access. We're going to hit next, and we're going to create the user. Next, you'll get an access key ID and a secret access key. You're going to want to download these or copy and paste them somewhere on your computer. I'm going to go ahead and download the CSV. We're going to come back to our terminal and hit enter. It's going to ask you for that access key. So I'm going to open up the CSV, pin it over here, open up my terminal again, pin it over here. I'm going to grab this access key and copy it and paste it in there and hit enter. And then I'm going to go grab the secret access key, paste it in there and hit enter. We will set up a profile name, and it's going to say that it has been successfully set up. So now that our Amplify user is all set up, I've opened our Vue project in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to open a new terminal, and I'm going to run the following command in it: amplify init. It's going to ask us for a project name. I'm just going to hit enter for the default. It's going to ask us for an environment name. I'm going to hit enter for dev. It's going to ask us what our default editor is. I'm going to choose Visual Studio. It's going to ask us what type of app we're building. We're going to choose JavaScript. It's going to ask us which framework we're using. We're going to choose Vue. For the source directory, we'll choose the default of src. For the distribution directory path, we're going to choose the default of dist, so just hit enter. For the build command, we're going to choose the default, so just hit enter. Start command, we'll hit enter. And then it's going to ask us if we want to use an AWS profile. We're going to say yes. And then we're going to choose the diligent dev profile or whatever you named your profile. And it's going to take a second to set this up, and I will be right back once it's finished. Okay, so Amplify has been successfully initialized inside of our project, and the next thing we're going to do is add an API to it. So we're going to say Amplify, add API. It's going to ask us what type of API we want to create. We're going to say GraphQL. We're going to hit enter for the default API name, and then we're going to choose Amazon Cognito user pool for the authorization type. And then we're going to do the default configuration. It's going to ask us how we want our users to be able to sign in. We're going to say username. It's going to ask us if we want to configure advanced settings. We're going to say no, I'm done. Then it's going to ask us if we want to configure advanced settings for the GraphQL API. We'll say no, I'm done. It's going to ask us if we have a GraphQL schema. We're going to select no. And then it's going to ask us if we wanted a guided schema creation, and we're going to say yes. It'll ask us what best describes our project. We're going to choose single object with fields. It's going to ask us if we want to edit the schema right now. We're going to say no. And now that Amplify has configured our API, we're going to go up here to this Amplify folder. We're going to go to Backend. We're going to go to API, and then schema.graphql, and you'll see we have a GraphQL model in here. The first thing we're going to do is change the model type from to-do to shopping list item. And then right after this model, we're going to say add auth. We're going to set a property of rules. Set that to an array with an object in it and say allow owner. Then we're going to come down here and change name to item name, and then get rid of this description. And essentially what this will do is it'll create a DynamoDB table with a column of ID and a column of item name. Then we're going to come down to our terminal and run the following command, amplify push. It's going to show us a summary of things it's creating, and it's going to ask us if we want to continue. We're going to say yes. It's going to ask us if we want to generate code for our newly created GraphQL API. We're going to say yes. It's going to ask us which type of language we want to target. We're going to say JavaScript. It's going to ask us the file name pattern of our GraphQL queries, mutations, and subscriptions, and we're just going to hit enter for the default. Then it's going to ask us if we want to generate our GraphQL operations. We're going to say yes. And then it's going to ask us for our maximum statement depth. We're going to hit enter and select the default of 2. And then it's going to go ahead and update our resources in the cloud, and this is going to take a second, and I will be right back when it's done. Okay, so Amplify has generated all of our resources in the cloud successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and close this Amplify folder and go to our source, and you'll see we have a new folder in here called GraphQL. And inside of here, we're going to have our mutations, our queries, and our subscriptions. And if we go ahead and look at one of these, you'll see that Amplify has generated all of the code that we're going to need to perform mutations, queries, and subscriptions. So you really don't have to know anything about GraphQL to use the GraphQL Amplify API. Now, before we get started coding, we need to install some dependencies here. So we'll head down to the terminal and we'll run npm I bootstrap-vue AWS-amplify and AWS-amplify-vue. And it's going to go ahead and install these dependencies for us, and when it's finished, I will be right back. Now that all of our dependencies have been installed, let's go ahead and set up our Vue project to use them. So to do that, we're going to go down to our main.js file, and underneath the router here, we're going to import some packages. We're going to say import amplify, star as amplify modules from AWS Amplify, and under that we'll say import amplify plugin from AWS Amplify Vue, and imports AWS config from AWS exports. The next thing we're going to do is set up Bootstrap. So we'll say import Bootstrap Vue, Bootstrap Vue icons from Bootstrap Vue. And then we'll import bootstrap/dist/css/bootstrap.css. And then we'll also import Bootstrap Vue/dist/bootstrapvue.css. Below this, we will configure Amplify by saying amplify.configure AWS config. Then we'll tell Vue to use the Amplify plugin and the Amplify modules. Next, we'll tell Vue to use Bootstrap Vue and the Bootstrap icons. We'll go ahead and hit Alt-Shift-F to format everything, and then we'll save it. So now that we've configured all that, let's go ahead and set up our authentication. And it's going to blow your mind how easy this is with Amplify. So we're going to go to our views folder. We're going to click on new file. We're going to say auth.view. Up here at the top, we will put our template tag, and we will put a script tag down here. Inside of our template, all we're going to say is Amplify Authenticator. And then inside of the script tag, we will import Amplify Event Bus from AWS Amplify Vue. And we'll also import auth from AWS Amplify. Inside of our export default, we will call the mounted lifecycle hook, and we'll say amplify event bus dot $on auth state, and then we'll pass it event info, set that equal to an arrow function, and we'll say if event info is equal to signed in, we're going to say this dot router dot push, and we will push them to the route with the name of home. We'll also say else if events info is equal to signed out. We want to push them again, but this time we're going to push them to a route with a name of auth. I'm going to go ahead and format this. So essentially what this is doing is it's listening to our Amplify Authenticator component that has been supplied to us through AWS Amplify, and it's watching their event bus to see if auth state has changed. If it's signed in, then we're going to push them to the home page, and if it's signed out, we're going to push them back to the auth page. Now we're also going to need to do a check to see if a user is already signed in, and then go ahead and push them to home. So we'll say if auth.current authenticated user, this dot router dot push them to a route with a name of home, else we'll say this dot router dot push, and we'll push them to a route with the name of auth. We're going to go ahead and hit Alt-Shift-F to format this, and we're going to go ahead and save this. Now our auth component that we just set up is the first thing we want people to see when they visit our application. And we're also referencing a route with a name of auth that we have yet to set up. So let's go into our router, and up at the top here, we're going to import auth from /views/auth.view. The next thing we're going to come down to is this first route here, and we're going to copy it and paste it above. I'm going to change the name to auth and the component to auth. We're going to come down to the home route, and we're going to give it a path of /home. And then below our component, we're going to say meta, and we're going to say requires auth, and set that to true. And what this is going to do is allow us to know which routes should be locked down and require authentication. In order to enforce our authentication, we're going to come down here, and below router, we're going to say router dot before each. We're going to make this async and pass it to from next and set that equal to an arrow function. Then we're going to say if to.matched.sum record.meta.requires auth. And inside of this if, we're going to do a try catch. And we're going to say await view dot prototype dot $ amplify dot auth dot current authenticated user. And right below that, we're just going to say next. And if this fails inside of the catch block, we're going to say next path and set that to /. And then I'm going to hit Alt-Shift-F to format everything. And we're going to come up here and save it. So essentially what we're saying here is before the router goes to each route, it's going to look to see if our route requires authentication, and then it's going to try to get the authenticated user. If it does, it's going to continue on to the next route. If not, it's going to send them back to the home page. Okay, so now that we have some stuff coded out, let's go ahead and spin up a development server and see what we've got so far. So down here in the terminal, we're going to run npm run serve. So after I spun up my development server, I realized I had a couple errors that were preventing me from seeing anything on the screen. The first error was that inside of our router.beforeEach, we need to have a next call or next method here outside of our requires auth. So right before this curly brace, go ahead and put next. Then inside of our auth file, this was failing because we were never awaiting this, and this should not be in an if block but in a try catch block. So to fix this, we're going to make the mounted method async, and then down here we're going to declare a try catch block, and we're going to take this auth.currentAuthenticated and we're going to cut it from here. Inside of the try, we're going to say awaits and then paste that in there. And if that does not fail into the catch block, we are going to push people to the home page. So we'll cut this out of the if block, put it there. And then if we do end up in this catch block, we want to take people to our auth page. So we will cut this and stick it up here. And then we can go ahead and get rid of this if else. And I'll do Alt-Shift-F to format it. Then I also cleaned up our app.view and got rid of this navigation here. And we'll go ahead and save everything. And then I'm going to pin this to this side of the screen. And you'll see now at our local host, at our root path, we have our Amplify Authenticator component showing here on the screen. So before we dive into the Amplify Authenticator component, let's go ahead and make it look a little bit prettier on the page. So let's head back to our auth.view file, scroll to the bottom, and make a style tag. And we'll make it CSS scoped. We'll give it a class of auth-page. We'll give it a height of 100 VH, a padding top of 10 VH, and a background color of light gray. Alt-Shift-F to format. We'll go up to the top here, create a new div. We will throw our Amplify Authenticator tags inside of this div. And then we'll give it a class of auth-page. dash page. And as we can see, this looks much better now. And now that we've styled our page, let's go ahead and take a look at what we get with the Amplify Authenticator component. Obviously right here, we can sign in with a username and password. You can also reset your password and create an account. So let's go ahead and create an account. I'll do a username of the diligent dev. Specify a password. An email of the diligent dev at gmail.com, and I'll put in a phone number. We'll go ahead and create an account, and then it's going to ask me for a confirmation code, and it's going to send us an email. So if we head over to my email account, you'll see that we have this email with a verification code, and I'll go ahead and copy this verification code out of here and paste it in here. So we'll go ahead and sign in. And upon sign in, we get redirected to our homepage. Now, obviously, this is not what we're going to want to see when we come to our homepage. We're going to want to see our shopping list here. So let's go to our home view. And let's go ahead and delete everything out of this div tag. Let's remove this hello world. We'll also remove the import. Let me make this a little bit bigger for the hello world. Alt-Shift-F to format this. And then to clean up a little bit, we will go to our components folder and go ahead and just remove hello world from here. We'll go ahead and save everything. And now we're going to start coding out our shopping list. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller and extend this out a little bit. Close this down. We're going to get rid of this div class of home and say container and give it an MT5 for some margin top 5. We're going to say B row, and this is part of Bootstrap Vue, so go check out their documentations to see what all of these mean. But it's essentially just a Bootstrap row. We're going to give it a class of justify content center. Then we're going to do a B form. And we're going to give it an attribute of inline to make it an inline form. Then we're going to do a B input. We're going to give it a V model of new item that we'll create later. We're going to give it a class of MB2 to give it some margin to the bottom. We're going to give it a placeholder of new item. And then in order to add items to it, we're going to say at key up .enter .prevent, and we're going to say add shopping item, which will be a method that we'll create later. I'm going to go ahead and save this so it formats it, and you'll see now we have a form with a text box. So we're going to also add a button to it. So we're going to say B button. We'll give it a variant of primary, and then we'll bind to the click event and say prevent, does not submit the form, add shopping item. Save this again, and we should probably give our button some text. We'll just say add, and we see we have a button here. It does not look great though, so what we're going to do is come up here and say mr-2 for margin right, and also come down to the button and give it a class of MB-2. And now our form is looking pretty good with our ability to add a new item. And now we'll start coding out our actual shopping list. So below we'll add another B row. We'll give it a class of MT-4 for a little margin on the top and justify content center to center everything in the screen. Then we'll give it a B call. We'll say when it's medium, we want 6. And when it's small, we want 12. Inside of this column, we'll do a B list group. And then we'll do a B list item. On this B list item, we'll do a V4. we'll say item, and we'll also grab the index in list items. And then we'll give it a key of index. Save this. Inside of our B list item, we'll do another B row with a class of flex row. Then we'll do a B column with a class of D flex, justify content around, and align items center. Inside of this column, we will do some text interpolation and say item.item name. And we'll also do another B button. We'll do size small to make it a small button, variance of danger. And then we'll bind to the click property and set that equal to delete shopping item and pass in the item.id. And then we'll give our button some text and we'll just say delete. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And this will act as our shopping list with the ability to delete items. So now that we have our template all laid out, let's go ahead and create the logic that's going to control our shopping list. So down here below, at the top of the script tag, we're going to import some things. We'll do import from AWS Amplify. And what we're going to import from there is Auth API and Graph operation. Then below that, we're going to say import star as queries from GraphQL /queries. And I'm just going to copy this line here and paste it below. And we're going to grab mutations and subscriptions. And we'll change these to mutations and change this to subscriptions. Down below here, inside of our export default, we'll get rid of this component. We'll make a data property and we'll return list items. Set that equal to an empty array. And we'll also return new item and set that equal to a blank string. Underneath here, we're going to do an async mounted. And inside of this, let's first grab the user. So we're going to say we'll say const current user equals awaits auth dot current authenticated user. Below that, we'll say const that equals this because we're going to have to use that in a block below. And the first thing we're going to do is create a subscription for newly created items. And this way we don't have to write logic to update items in the template. We're going to make a subscription. It's going to act as a real-time service from AppSync, and we won't have to do anything except set that subscription up. Okay, so below this, we're going to do api.graphql. We're going to pass it a GraphQL operation, and we're going to pass it something from our subscriptions file. So if we go ahead and look in our subscriptions file, we see we have this onCreated shopping list item, and this will get fired every single time a shopping list item is created. So go back to home, and we're going to pass in subscriptions.onCreate shopping list item, and then we're going to pass it a property of owner and set that equal to current user dot username. I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F to format it, and then right here I'm going to say dot subscribe, and we subscribe to it. We get this next property, and we'll set that equal to an arrow function. So when we get a newly created item, we're going to say that dot list items dot push, then we'll say action dot value dot data dot on create shopping list item. Hit Alt-Shift-F again to format that. And so we've just set up a subscription, and every single time a new shopping list item is created, we're going to go ahead and push into our list items array. Next, we're going to set up a subscription for when we delete items out of our shopping list. So what I'm going to do, since it's very similar code, is take this subscription right here. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it right here. Now we need to go back to our subscriptions file and look for deleted. So that's on update, and this one is on delete. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this variable out of here, go back here and paste it in here. That should stay the same because the owner will be the same. And then what we want to do down here is we will get rid of this right here because we don't want to push an item into our array. We actually want to delete items out of it. So I'm going to say let ID equal, actually we'll go back and we'll say const ID equals action.value.data.onDelete shopping list item .id. And we'll come down here and we'll say const index equals that.listItems.map. And we're going to map, if I can spell, we're going to map over the IDs and grab the index of our ID that we specified above. Then we're going to say that.listItems.splice. And we're going to splice at the index, and we're going to remove 1 from the array. Okay, so the next thing we're going to want to do is grab all the shopping list items when the page loads. So outside of this mounted lifecycle hook, we're going to create another lifecycle hook called async created. And inside of here, we're going to say const, we'll do some object destructuring, data equals await API.GraphQL, and we'll pass it a GraphQL operation. And in order to get this operation, let's head back to our GraphQL folder and look at our queries. We see we have get shopping list item, and that gets 1 item, and then we have this list shopping list items, and that will return all of the shopping list items that we have. So we're going to copy this. We're going to go back to home, and we're going to say queries dot and paste that in. And I'm going to save this, and we see we get an error on the screen that we're not using our data property. So down here we'll say, and I'll go ahead and close this out, data dot list item shopping list dot items dot for each. Pass an item into our arrow function, and we'll say this dot list items dot push item. And we'll go ahead and save that. And if you recalled up above, we made a couple methods. One was add shopping items. So let's go ahead and add that now. Underneath our created lifecycle hook, we'll create a property called methods. And we will add a method called async add shopping item. Inside of this, we will say awaits API.GraphQL. We'll pass it a GraphQL operation. And this time we're going to be looking in our mutations file. So we'll go back here, we'll go up to our GraphQL, we'll go to mutations, and we see we have this mutation called create shopping list item. So we'll go ahead and copy that. We will come back to our home component, and we will say mutations dot and paste that create shopping list item in. And we'll save. And we need to pass this mutation our item. So we'll say comma, pass an object, and call it input, and make that an object, and say item name equals this dot new item. I'll go ahead and save this, and I'll close this out so we can get a good look at this. So we have our add shopping list item. We create a GraphQL call with a GraphQL operation, and we make a mutation called create shopping list item, and we pass it our new item. Oh, and it looks like we have a bug here. This parenthesis should not be here. So we'll delete it from there, and we will put it on the end over here, and we'll hit save. And now we can go ahead and test the functionality of this out. So we'll just say test, hit add, and you'll see it shows up down here, but we're not clearing out the text box. So underneath this awaits, we will just say this dot new item and set it to a blank string. We'll save this again. You'll see it loads up on the first page load. And then we'll say eggs, we'll hit add, and you'll see it appears down here, and it looks like we're having some issues here. So let's scroll up and take a look at what's going on. Oh, this should be B list group item. And we'll also change it down here. And we'll save it. All right, and now that looks much better. And now that we have our add item functionality working, let's go ahead and work on our delete functionality. So we called it delete shopping item, and I'm going to copy this and go down to our methods. And underneath this method, I'm going to add this with an ID. We're also going to make it async. And all I'm going to do is go ahead and copy this right here, because it's very similar code. And let's go ahead and take a look at our mutations and see what the delete needs. So delete shopping list item, we'll copy this, go back to home. Instead of create shopping list, we'll replace it with delete, and we'll pass in the input. Instead of item name, we'll say ID, and we'll pass the ID that we're passing into this function. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. See our page reload, and if we click on this delete, you'll see that it is removed from our list. Now to view everything in AWS, we can go ahead and open up a new terminal and run Amplify console. And it's going to open up a web page here, and I'll pin it to the side of the screen. And it's going to show us all the resources that we have in the cloud. So we can go ahead and look at the API. And you'll see that we have this shopping list items table, so we'll go ahead and view it. We'll go ahead and view the items in there, and you'll see we have one record with an item name of test, and everything else is given to you by Amplify by default. So let's go ahead and add another item. We'll add eggs back and hit add, and then we will refresh this table, and we'll see we have another record in there. We'll delete test out of it and refresh the table, and you'll see that test is now gone. If we go back to the Amplify console, we can click on Authentication, View in Cognito. We'll go to User Pools up here, and you'll see we have our Amplify Shopping List user pool. If we click on that, we can go into Users and Groups, and we see our user with the username of Diligent Dev that we created. And that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this tutorial. If you got any value out of this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out my channel and motivates me to keep making videos just like this. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns about this video, go ahead and drop a line in the comment section below. And until next time, happy coding.